Welcome! In this episode I tackle some wonderful track weathering, kit bash some beautiful buffer stops, and create chaos with uncouplers.
Hello everyone and welcome back. Especially a big thank you to all you recent subscribers to the channel. However, I do have some bad news. It turns out that only 87% of you are actually subscribed. So use one of these, go below, touch that subscribe button. It will be worth it. Oh, and while you're there, give it one of those as well. He says, coming cap in hand. It does help the channel, really it does. And I'm enjoying this whole process of building my model layout, receiving comments from you guys, giving me tips and hints and guiding me in the right direction. But also, actually, I really enjoy recording and editing as well. That's kind of like a double-edged sword in terms of two hobbies that I love mashed together. So yes, please give some like and the joy will be returned back to you, I guarantee. Okay, let's have a look at where we are and let me talk about what I want to do next. Many of you may have already realised that I don't actually have a step-by-step plan on how I'm going to complete my layout. I just have some general ideas in terms of what I feel I want to do next. I've definitely tackled the majority of the wiring and electronics. Now, I would like to add some lights. I'd like to add lights in the buildings, and what I'm thinking at the moment is I will have the buildings and any additional street lights all switched together. I'll have the engine shed over in this corner, which will be switched independently. And that's mainly just because I want to have a different type of light there. I want a really bright white LED. The rest will be a bit more warm yellow. And I think the only other thing is I want to add some buffer stops with some LED lights on there as well. So buffers on each of the main three sidings. I think I'll need one down here as well, which is going to be kind of, I think it's going to be a refueling area, somewhere for the diesels to pick up their diesel fuel, but possibly also a little bunker area for some coal if I can get it in. Bearing in mind, this area here is meant to be landscape, and I will get to that in a moment because many of you have left some really useful comments. One of you also left a small comment with regards to slightly adjusting the layout of the track, and I think that's a really good point. So obviously at the ends of the layouts, the main line, which comes through the center here, kind of goes off into the unknown. And I'm thinking on this corner, I'm going to have this kind of hill or cliff face, and then it will kind of just bend around in some form of old sort of tunnel. I don't quite know how I'm going to finish this corner here, but I'll get to that. And again, on the other end, it's going to sail off into the distance, but I think I'll have something a little bit more industrial down there, maybe some sort of wrought iron bridge, a bit of rust, bit of weathering practice for me to do there. But one of you did mention that actually it would make sense to move the track rather than it going into the corner off to the side, primarily because if I ever wanted to connect up a fiddle yard, then I could do, and I think that's a good idea, although I don't have any plans for a fiddle yard. I think I'm going to do it down that end because it can run off and then it can come off straight in this direction. So I think I will adjust that in due course, but not today. But I think that's a great idea. So thank you very much for that comment. Keep them coming, they're really useful. Last episode was a bit of an epic at 40 minutes runtime, and I'm hoping to keep this one just that little bit shorter. I won't be tackling the lights today because I'm waiting on an order of cable, so I can't run anything just yet. But I'm thinking that given that I've already been outside this morning painting fences and painting some of my interior doors, I might get the paint out up here and do a little bit of track weathering. Now, there are lots of different ways to weather tracks. Sometimes you ballast first, some of you prefer to ballast after, some of you use paint, some of you use airbrushes, some of you use weathering powders. I haven't quite decided on the complete process I'm going to be going through, but I do have a small pot of RailMatch Sleeper Grime, which I'd like to get onto the sleepers and the rails before I think about ballasting. I'm trying to leave ballasting right to the last minute, primarily because I haven't yet decided exactly what's going to be within the scene on this layout. So if I leave that till last, if I need to have any more cables for lights, or if I want to put any extra details in that in effect need to be there before ballasting, at least that's not going to be a hindrance. But for now, I feel like I can do a little bit of weathering first and foremost, so that's what I'll be getting on with first. However, before that, I'm feeling a bit parched. Fancy a drink, anyone? Don't panic. Those of you who have been following along will be familiar with my Bacardi box, which I currently have all of my Metcalfe models stored away in. I want to get these out onto the board because I want to mark around them and start to think about my plan for the scenery. I think I'm pretty happy with that. Although I think I want to make one change. If you remember in a previous episode, I was trying to shoehorn in a double level crossing and it just wasn't work. I actually have the same situation here. I'm trying to utilize every single one of these Metcalfe models, but I think I'm going to have to sacrifice one. And that is this one here, the warehouse at the front. The reason being is I'm planning on having a road which comes all the way around across the tracks and into this kind of area here, so that you can service the main engine shed. And of course, you'll also need to be able to access the signal box. Now, I could shoehorn this over here on this side of the tracks, but bearing in mind what I've just said and the fact that this track is going to move and I'm going to have some sort of industrial style bridge, I think there's just going to be too much going on there. So sadly, I think I'm going to have to say goodbye to this. I will find a use for it in the future, but for now, goodbye. I have my Sharpie, so let's start drawing around all of these buildings. This is very much just a guide for now because I will need to get some rolling stock and check the clearances, but at least this will give me a rough idea on where I need to put things like roads and street lights, and it will allow me to move forward. Great, so everything is now marked up and I can start to think about where I'm going to place my roads. I do have an engine shed to go in here, and for that I'm going to be building another Metcalfe model. This one is the P0331 single track engine shed in red brick. So this will actually match all of the other kits that I've already got. So there you go guys, if you need a reason to subscribe to the channel, I will be building this kit some point in the very near future, but it's out now just so I can check the size. 235 by 85 millimeters overall size. So I shall get my tape measure and mark out on the board pretty much where that's going to be roughly, and then I can start to look at where the roads and access might be. So 85 mil is 42.5 to the center. It's going to be very close to this track actually, something to be aware of. Okay, let's do another one up here. 42.5, give or take there, and then the overall was 235, wasn't it? So that's coming in, well, it's going to have to be to the edge of the track, so right on the corner. If I go right on the corner, yeah, we're looking at about there, squaring that down from there, 235. There. So roughly, and it really is roughly, there to there. Now, of course, the actual engine shed isn't this rectangle shape. There's a little bit that pokes out the side. So we'll have to see when I actually come round to building it. And it is very tight to this track. I should be able to get a loco in there, no problem. I've got a bit of space, but I will have to offer it up. And if needs be, if I've got any wiggle room to move this way a bit, then I certainly will be utilising it. It's good to get things organised, and I do like to stop every now and then and just reassess exactly where I am, because otherwise it's very easy to get overwhelmed with a huge list in your mind of things that you need to do and steps that you need to take in terms of completing a layout. So I'm happy with that. Now let's have a look at weathering some track. Presently I've got 2 pots of the RailMatch branded paint. I have got Sleeper Grime, which is the darker one, and I've also got Dark Rust, which is the slightly lighter orangey colour. As you know, I'm new to this hobby, so I am learning things as I go along. This particular method is one that railway guy did on one of his tutorial videos, and it's one that stuck with me as one of my preferred methods compared with all the others that I've seen and read about across the internet. There are a couple of primary reasons why I'm favouring this method. The first one is because I have a small layout. I think if I had a much larger layout, I wouldn't be advocating using this method because it does take quite a while. However, with a couple of very fine paintbrushes, I can take my time and make sure I get both sides of the rails. I'll also be using the dark rust on the chairs just to pick those out. Additionally, and my second reason, it means that everything is properly painted and has colour. Rails and sleepers get grime everywhere, and I'm just not sure whether or not I have the skill yet to ballast this entire thing and then make sure that everything is picked out properly. So I thought I'll just do this in steps. I'll make sure I get some colour onto the rails and onto the sleepers now, and then if I do miss anything, at least that base colour is already in place. And also, because it takes so long to do, it means I can be up here quietly beavering away while the wife and kids are outside. Shh. With the sleeper and rail weathering underway, I'm going to turn my attention to some of the peripheral items on the layout. Now, I did mention that I wouldn't be looking at buffer stops earlier on, but I've actually changed my mind because if I'm working on rails, then buffer stops really are part of that process. So in front of me, I have 2 packs of LEDs. Both are a collection of different colours: red, yellow, green, blue and white. Now, I'm not really going to be using many of the other colours. It's really the whites and yellows that I'm looking at, and in this case the reds. In this packet I have some standard 5mm LEDs, and in this one I have some 3mm LEDs. Each contains 120 individual LEDs, way more than I think I'm ever going to need, but they are dirt cheap, about £6 a pack. And if you're into electronics like I am, then you can always use these in future projects. I purchased these 5mm LEDs first, intending on using them within the buildings for lighting and also on the buffer stops, but they are 2mm too big for the standard Hornby buffer stops. So instead I picked up a new pack of 3mm, and these are the perfect size. Let me bring you in closer and we can have a look. I have 10 red LEDs in the pack, and as you can see, these are already pre-wired with a resistor, which is perfect. It saves a bit of extra soldering. They're also sheathed quite nicely, so I can get these straight onto the buffers. Let's just take one out and take a closer look. So here is a standard Hornby buffer stop, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. So this thickness in here is approximately 5mm. So if we offer up the standard size LED, you'll notice that it is just way too thick. If we drill a hole in here, we will be splitting this in half. So 3mm, if not smaller, is the way to go. And this, if we drill a subtle hole, will fit in there perfectly. The aim being, I get myself a nice drill bit, go straight down through the middle there. Then on the rear side, I will just bring the legs down and then through the board into my lighting loom. Having looked at a range of buffer stops on the internet and in books, it appears that they come in a range of flavours. There are a range of conditions, a range of painted styles, and a range of construction, so I feel like I kind of have a free rein on how I make my buffer stops look. If you're running a DCC layout, your track is constantly live, and it means that you can actually attach your buffer lights directly to the track, and there are some really good ones out there which will clip in a kind of inverted Y shape between the rails and then sit in a pair or singles above the buffer beam. However, I'm using a DC layout, so I need to use a separate wiring loom in order to get all the lights to work. Right, you're back in front of me now. I was getting a bit dizzy there, going from one camera to the other. Before I get on to the buffer stops, let's have a look at these Peco uncouplers. These are part of the Peco Streamline range, and they are SL29 uncouplers. Because it's a shunting layout, one of the things I definitely wanted to have was the ability to easily uncouple wagons from the locos. I've incorporated a simple shunting puzzle into the layout, so uncoupling and recoupling is going to be taking place fairly often, and I didn't want to be doing that by hand. I've put a fair amount of work into making sure the points are switched and automatic, so it made sense to have the uncouplers doing the same. Again, we're into that situation where there are different ways to achieve the same result. On the very cheap end, you can use clear plastic bent over between the sleepers on the track to create that upward lift to release your tension locks. That's absolutely fine, and I did think about doing that for quite a while, but then I decided I just don't like how it looks. If I'm going to have something on the track, at least I want to be able to weather it in. So that's okay if you're not too worried about the aesthetic. Generally speaking, I'm not really going for detail on this track, but I think if something is there, at least let's make that look fairly realistic. At the top end, you have motorized uncouplers, which when activated via a servo simply lift a bar up and down, achieving the same result. I felt I'd had enough fun with wiring up my switches, and I didn't want to go for the plastic option I've just mentioned, so I felt like a spring-loaded option like these Peco uncouplers was the way to go. So while I am weathering the track, I'm going to get the uncouplers installed in position, and I'm also going to do the same with my buffer stops. So we need a 3mm bit. I'm missing a 3.5 unfortunately, but 3 is there. Drill is in the chuck, and so very carefully, without knocking the camera or drilling into my finger, I want to get that in the middle. And there she goes. Safety first. A fair amount of plastic comes off there, so you may want eye protection. I'll leave that up to you. And I suggest you use a sharp drill bit as well, because mine is blunt. You may need to clean off a little bit of swarf that you get. Obviously this is quite stiff plastic, so you do tend to get a little file might be useful, but that should now fit into that hole, and that pushes in there quite nicely. And if I just bend the legs around, you can see how we'll run those cables down. We'll paint those in, And that is looking pretty good, to be honest. One other thing I'll need to do is just paint the rear of the LED so we don't get any light leakage, but that's then ready to be weathered in. So I'm just taking a small file to remove the various bits of swarf burrs off the back. There we go. Now there is a little bit in there, and if you have a small round file, that's perfect, but I don't have one quite the right size, so I'm just going to get in there in a minute, probably with this, making sure that's lovely and smooth, which it is. And one more, that one's been done, that's not too bad. So then it's just a case of carefully getting in there, and that looks pretty clean. Okay, so that's that one done. This one's not too bad. There we go. Yeah, and the last one, yeah, that one's pretty horrific. You can see it's not quite clean. It will push through, obviously, when you push your LED in. Yeah, it's a little bit on the back there. So that's just got a triangular one here, which just let me go in. I don't want to make it too big. I don't want to make the hole any bigger because it's exactly 3mm and these fit really well. So I shall grab an LED. Now, if I thought about this, I could orientate the buffer stop in the same way it would be on the board, and therefore I would know whether I am black to back. But I think given that these wires are just going to go through the board, I shall just very carefully push them in there, and they're a real snug fit. And if you've got any nail left, you can just push them into place. And there we go, that's looking pretty good. So let's just carefully bend the legs into position. There is a resistor on there, so I don't want to snap it off. And then that will run down there. This last one is just a little bit tight, so I'm just going to open up the hole a tad more with a file. There we go, that's lovely. Squeeze in there. 4 Hornby buffer stops ready to be weathered. So here we are, the buffers are now positioned on the track. I drilled a couple of 2mm holes in the ends just to feed the cables through. So if I just lift up the board and carefully pull those through, we should then have ourselves another job completed. And just this last one at the end, if I can feel them underneath. 1 and final one, there we go. 2. I will need to come back and paint the wires in, and I feel like I could have done a slightly better job at positioning the wires. Perhaps if I had glued them down the sides first and then drilled the holes, maybe they would have been a little bit neater. But actually, I'm not too fussed about that. I think by the time you have got this coloured, or painted in rather, I don't think it's going to be a big issue. Also, I've just pulled them a little bit too tight, I must admit, but that's fine. The other Brucey bonus is I did happen to have 3 with black to the back, so that follows my current convention. That remaining buffer stop where I had the cables around the wrong way actually worked out because down here it works going in the opposite direction with black to the back. And this is going to be the kind of siding outside of the engine shed where we're going to have our locos refueling with diesel and potentially coal. Last but not least then, let's take a look at these uncoupling units. I shall just open the box and lay them out. Let's remove the litter. They are on a sprue, so I'm going to have to cut those off. And then it looks like this bit clips into the track. There's what looks like a leaf spring, for want of a better description, a copper leaf spring, which is going to push underneath. And then this top part will just be sprung into position. Fairly simple, but I think more effective than the clear plastic method, but also not so involved as using motors, as I mentioned earlier. Okay, let's get these on. The problem with this situation is that all of my stuff is under the desk. Okay. Very carefully remove the sprues. You know what? Don't trust myself. Let's be sensible about this. There we go, that's one. Okay, that's pretty good. So let's start with, we want to be offloading as close really to the turnouts, to the points as possible, but it needs to be on a straight, obviously, and that is pretty much there. So does that clip underneath like, oh, hold on a minute, let's think about this, because I've gone over the join there. Also, these are Peco. So does that mean they're going to throw a wobbly when I'm using Hornby track? There's also two tiny little pegs on the sprue. So don't go throwing away that piece thinking it's all rubbish, because you do need these two as well, which poke up through the holes here and here. And then obviously I think provide housing for, oh no, there we go, for the holes on the back of that piece there. So frustratingly, I think these only work with Peco streamlined track. The actual legs don't quite match the spacing you get with the sleepers on Hornby track. Very, very annoying. This one here is a piece of Peco track. And there you go, it just drops into place, no issue whatsoever. Right, I don't like Hornby's uncouplers, so I think I'm going to have to do a little bit of bodging and a little bit of gluing to make this system work. But I don't think it's going to be a big issue. I shall just remove two of the lugs off one end, or maybe just shave it back ever so slightly. We're talking about a tolerance of about 2 mil here, so it shouldn't be an issue. For now, let's continue working on this. So we've got the small plugs. Wow, these are fiddly. And they go in there. That one goes in there. I know you can't see this very well. So let's grab this. I feel like I almost want to construct it first. So that goes in there. And then I need to get the pegs pushed into, oh, this is insane. These two pegs, as you can see, that are just kind of hanging there in gravity, need to align with these holes. And I apologise that the, oh, there we go, that's one in. Apologise the light's not brilliant. I mean, come on Peco, you could probably just manufacture these. No, how do I get that in there? Let's see if I can just... It's falling out. Ooh. Oh, I see. Let's push. Oh, there we go. If we push that flat, then life is much easier. That's how it should work. I feel like I'm going to get some tweezers out in a minute. There we go. That one's in. And that one's in. I dare not glue these. And that's it. Ever so slightly sprung, and that should just drop in there. And that's it. That's literally all it does. And I'm now beginning to wonder whether or not the plastic kind of cheap do-it-yourself route might actually have been better. I think for the Hornby track, it's such a small tolerance. I think if I just nip a bit off the edge here, very carefully with a craft knife, just, I mean, almost file it. I might be better off just filing it a little bit there and a little bit here, and then that should just drop into place. And it looks like there's 2 holes on each of the ends here, which means that I can actually tack it to the board as well. And that will stop it from moving, because presently, obviously these are just rested in place. So let me give that a go. I'll bring you straight back in, and then I think that will be the end of the episode. Okay, so this is what I've been doing. I'm simply just shaving off 1 mil off this side. I've already done the other end. The camera will stay in focus. So this end has been shaved off already. Let me just take these extra pieces off, and then it should, fingers crossed, if I've got any fingers left by the end of this, it should sit between the sleepers. Okay, so I'm hoping with this wide piece here, it should fit, and there you go, you can see it drops in. Yes, that's all it needed. A little bit of adjustment. If I can get my fingers out of the way, just sits in there. A bit of a fiddle, mind, but we got there in the end. I think after all of that effort, it's time to run some locos. So I've got my new favourite shunter, the Ruston 88DS, and let's just run her backwards and then see if we can uncouple. Got some wagons here with various aggregate mix in the back, and I shall show you in a future video how I made those. Fairly simple, but quite effective. So there we go, we've run over there, that's not a problem. Let's just go forward, make sure they don't uncouple. I do need to clean the track after the painting. And that's running up there lovely. And this time around, let's see if we can bring it into position and uncouple on this modified uncoupler. And there she goes. A little bit janky, but I think that's because the wagons have the old D-shaped couplings rather than the new ones, and so they don't actually sit central, they're quite on the edge. But I'm happy with that, and I can always swap out these couplings or just use different wagons. I do have others. Let's just do one more then, bring it into this siding. I'm just going to quickly clean the track and then we'll give this one a go as well. Okay, so let's pull these ones out. Carefully back into the other siding. And let's see if that's got it. These D couplings are going to be, there we go. That's perfect. Run all the way out. Let's just go back in, collect them and put them back where they were. I feel like I've made some really positive steps in the right direction here today. Incremental steps as they are, but every little helps. Hopefully by the time we get to the next episode, I'll have some wire so I can finish off the lighting loom. As you may have noticed earlier, I've started to drill the holes underneath the buildings, ready to poke the cables up through. So as I said in opening, hit that subscribe button for that episode. If any of you are going to the London Model Railway Show at Ali Pali, I will be there. Whether or not this video will have gone out before then or after then, I'm not entirely sure. It depends on how quickly I can get it edited. But if you do happen to see me, you happen to recognize me, feel free to tap me on the shoulder, say hi, buy me a coffee, buy me a beer. I'm easy. But until next time, take care everyone. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.